When Pontiac borrowed Chevy's heart, it didn't just make a car, it made history. Collision United States. Today, we're taking a look at another unique classic, the 1958 Pontiac Parisienne. This particular model was produced and sold in Canada. Interestingly, even though there's an American flag visible in the background of the picture, this car wasn't made in the United States at all. It was a Canadian-built Pontiac, created for the local market and for export to other regions. For those who might not know, Pontiacs manufactured in Canada were quite different from their American counterparts up until around the mid-1970s. During this period, Canadian Pontiacs essentially featured Pontiac-style bodies mounted on Chevrolet platforms, powered by Chevrolet engines and transmissions. In some cases, as we'll see here, they even came with engines that were exclusive to the Canadian market unless you were buying a medium-duty truck in the US. The main reason for this setup was that, back in those days, Pontiac served as General Motors' high-volume brand in Canada, rather than Chevrolet. Pontiac outsold Chevrolet by a wide margin in Canada, and due to heavy import duties, trade restrictions, and production quotas at the time, achieving economies of scale was essential. To deal with these challenges, General Motors needed a localized parts and manufacturing base in Canada. The most practical solution was to share components with Chevrolet, which also simplified production considerably. In 1958, the Parisienne represented the top-tier Pontiac model, and as you can see, it was a stunning automobile. Its overall styling was quite similar to the American Bonneville, but you'll notice it had plenty of extra chrome, stainless accents, and decorative trim along the sides, details we'll look at more closely in a moment. For some context, Chevrolet models in 1958 rode on a 117.5-inch wheelbase, 2.5 inches longer than the 1957 versions. Pontiacs, on the other hand, came with either a 121-inch or 124-inch wheelbase, depending on whether it was a shorter Catalina or the longer Bonneville model. Now, the Parisienne featured Bonneville-style side trim with all that beautiful bright work, yet the body itself was actually from a Catalina. It used the Chevrolet chassis with the 117.5-inch wheelbase, which meant the wheels didn't quite line up perfectly within the wheel arches, a quirky detail unique to this particular Pontiac. Those familiar with my discussions know I'm generally not fond of most 1958 General Motors designs, at least in terms of aesthetics. The Oldsmobiles and Buicks from that year, especially the 1958 Buick Limited, strike me as overly styled, weighed down by an excess of chrome, pot metal, and shiny trim pieces. The styling on some of these cars might seem a bit excessive, but in my opinion, the Pontiac stands out beautifully among General Motors' 1958 lineup. Even though it features a lot of chrome and trim, I'd still call it one of the most attractive designs of that year. I especially love that rocket-shaped streak running along the side. It begins at the rear quarter panel, creating a flowing line painted in white and bordered with bright metal trim that separates it from the copper-toned body. Then there's that incredibly long front end, stretching all the way forward to the nose of the car. Just beneath the tip of that rocket nose, you can spot a small Parisienne script emblem. That's where the series name appeared on other models as well. One amusing thing about the bright work on these Canadian Pontiacs, which was similar to what you'd find on US versions, is how it changed depending on the trim level. The higher-end Parisienne had all the decorative pieces, 4 small fake vents behind the front wheel, the signature rocket trim, and a row of little star-shaped accents in that scalloped body section. Drop one step down the lineup to the Laurentian, and you'd lose those 4 faux vents behind the front wheel. The Laurentian still had the stars, but instead of 4 at the rear, there were only 3. It was a small but noticeable downgrade, much like Buick's approach, where the pricier models had 4 ventiports and the lower ones had only 3. Below the Laurentian came the Stratochief, which lost the rocket trim entirely but kept the star accents. Finally, at the base of the range was the Pathfinder, the most affordable Pontiac in Canada for 1958. The Pathfinder had a simpler look, with no rockets, no stars, and very minimal side trim. Still, even in its plainest form, it was a handsome car overall. So that was the full lineup from bottom to top, starting with the Pathfinder, then the Stratochief, followed by the Laurentian, and finally the Parisienne at the top. Now, let's turn our attention to another 1958 Pontiac Parisienne, because the lighting on this particular car really shows off its styling beautifully. Take a look at the front end, it's both commanding and elegant. The grille design is especially striking, surrounded by a loop-style chrome trim that gives it a refined, sculpted appearance. If you look closely, right below the C in the Pontiac badge, you'll spot a small emblem on the grille. Interestingly, the previous car had a V emblem in that spot, but this one doesn't, and that's because this model is equipped with a 6-cylinder engine. In Canada, Pontiac offered a 261 cubic inch inline-6 engine, something you couldn't get in the US unless you were purchasing a medium-duty truck. American Chevrolets of the time came with a smaller 235 cubic inch 6, so this Canadian version was essentially a larger, more powerful version of that same engine, and it came standard in Canadian Pontiacs of this era. Take note of the grille itself, it spans the full width of the car, giving the front end a wide, imposing look. And those quad headlamps? They're a standout feature. 1958 was actually the first year that 4 headlight setups were legally allowed in all 50 US states, which explains why you rarely see them on 1957 models. Some 57 cars, like certain Chryslers, were offered in both dual and quad headlamp versions due to the varying regulations at the time. By 1958, though, four headlights had become the new norm. I also love how the design of the headlight bezels is echoed in the surrounding chrome trim, which cleverly incorporates the parking lights and turns signals right into the grille. Another striking feature of this car is the set of aircraft-inspired strakes positioned along the tops of the front fenders, each ending in a beautifully detailed piece of chrome trim. The hood itself is a design highlight. It's sculpted with a strong central crease that becomes increasingly defined as it moves forward, before gently tapering off as it rolls over the leading edge. The lower section of the hood has a subtle concave shape that almost echoes the scalloped contour you see on the rear quarter panel, a thoughtful bit of design harmony. As we move to the side view, captured here during golden hour, that perfect late-day sunlight, the car absolutely shines in its two-tone green finish. It's a quintessential late 1950s color combination that really flatters the shape. Looking at the profile, the body sides are remarkably clean and refined. There's a soft curve along the top where the door surface gently transitions inward toward the window glass, and below that, the distinctive scalloped section adds depth and character. Overall, it's a simple yet elegant side design. Aside from that scalloped detail, the chrome trim, and the rocket-inspired streak, the body is very restrained. If you were to imagine it without those elements, you'd have an exceptionally smooth and minimal form, which is exactly why the added brightwork works so well here. It provides just enough visual drama to complement the clean underlying shape. Of course, being a car from the late 1950s, it features that sweeping wraparound windshield that was so popular at the time, matched by a curved rear window and a gracefully arched roofline that ties the whole design together beautifully. That sweeping roofline was something General Motors carried through its designs for many years, and in my opinion, they executed it better than Ford. Ford often stuck with a more traditional three-box layout: engine bay, cabin, and trunk, while GM added a graceful arc to the roof that softened the look. On this Pontiac, that curve is especially pronounced. What's really fascinating is how GM's designers chose not to let the roof panel, paint, and chrome trim continue straight back through the rear basket handle section. Instead, they broke the line partway through the C-pillar, creating a distinct and stylish visual break. It's a small detail, but it really adds character to the car. Before switching back to the 348-powered version, let's take a quick look at the engine bay of this six-cylinder Pontiac. Under the hood sits a 261 cubic inch inline six, proudly wearing the Pontiac script on its valve cover, as it rightfully should. Back then, this engine was exclusive to Canadian Pontiacs. Unlike the smaller 235 cubic inch 6 used in US Chevrolets, this 261 was essentially the same unit found in American medium-duty trucks. It's a strong, torquey motor. I actually have one in my own 1959 Parisienne, and while it's not quick by modern standards, 0 to 60 takes around 18 or 19 seconds, it has plenty of low-end pull. It accelerates smoothly from a stop and is paired with the familiar Powerglide automatic transmission, just like in Chevrolets of that era. And speaking of which, in Canada it's never called a Chevy. Locals simply say Chev, without the Y at the end. Now, moving back to the other car, take a look at the rear styling. There's chrome everywhere: on the bumper, around the tail lamps, the reverse lights, and the bold Pontiac block lettering. The deck lid features large chrome streaks, likely a nod to the old Pontiac silver streak design motif from earlier decades. Up top, you'll also spot a faux air extractor on the roof, a detail borrowed from the 1958 Impala. GM designers seemed quite fond of that feature and used it on several cars. Interestingly, it was originally intended to function as a real vent on the Impala, but testing revealed it actually caused air to flow backward into the cabin instead of venting it out. As a result, it was sealed off and turned into decorative trim instead. And one last detail: you might be wondering where the fuel filler is located on this car. It isn't hidden behind the license plate like on some other models. That plate is simply recessed into the bumper as part of the design. In fact, the fuel filler is cleverly hidden behind the driver's side reverse light, which swings outward to reveal the gas cap. That's such a neat feature of these 1958 Pontiacs. Many cars from that era used similar hidden fuel fillers, disguising them behind taillights, trim pieces, or license plates so there wouldn't be an unsightly fuel door interrupting the body lines. This particular setup is especially well executed. You'd never guess where the filler is until you see it in action. Moving to the rear view of the car, there's a strong sense of balance that mirrors the front-end design. You'll notice the symmetry in the quad headlamps up front and the matching quad taillights at the back, both surrounded by similar chrome housings. Below them are the reverse lights, and beneath the bumper you'll see dual exhaust outlets. While the actual exhaust exits below the bumper on this car, the styling gives the impression that the pipes flow directly through it, a popular design cue of the time. The rear decklid continues the theme of vertical chrome streaks running along its length, a clear nod to Pontiac's classic silver streak styling from earlier decades. It's a tasteful reinterpretation of that heritage touch, giving the back of the car a strong, elegant presence. Inside, being the top-of-the-line Parisienne, the cabin is richly trimmed with brightwork and elegant detailing. The door panels, for instance, feature polished metal accents along their upper sections that visually connect with the bright trim on the dashboard. It's an early example of an interior design philosophy that aims to create a unified, flowing look between the doors and instrument panel, something that would later become fashionable again in the 1990s and 2000s. But here, Pontiac was already experimenting with that cohesive, integrated design decades earlier. I absolutely love the white and copper interior combination here. It's a perfect match for the car's exterior styling. If you look closely at the accelerator and brake pedals, you'll notice they're actually Chevrolet parts rather than Pontiac-specific ones, a reminder of the shared mechanical roots between the two brands in Canada. The interior design carries a wonderful sense of flow and unity. The horizontal strakes on the door panels continue seamlessly into the rear section, creating a strong sense of harmony between the front and back of the cabin. Those same lines are echoed in the seat stitching and even in the armrests, tying the entire interior together beautifully. It's a subtle design approach that also connects with the exterior, especially the linear accents we saw on the rear deck lid. Looking at the dashboard up close, this car features what I'd consider one of the most elegant instrument panels of its time. The rounded gauges sit under a softly curved hood, blending circular and linear shapes in a way that feels both functional and artistic. Chrome and polished trim are used generously, giving it an upscale, jewel-like appearance that few cars of the era could match. A closer look reveals the Powerglide shift indicator, the familiar PRNDL layout, confirming this Pontiac uses the Powerglide automatic rather than the hygromatic transmission found in US models. In fact, Canadian Pontiacs didn't offer much else in terms of automatics. While American buyers could choose the Turboglide, the Powerglide was the only automatic option in Canada. That was probably a wise choice, since the heavy cast-iron Powerglide was known for being tough, smooth, and very reliable. Anyone who's driven a car equipped with one will remember that distinctive soft hum it makes when idling in park or neutral, a small but endearing part of its character. And before we move on to the real highlight, what's under the hood, just take one last look at this copper and white cabin. It's hard to think of another car in this price range from the late 1950s that offered this level of craftsmanship and intricate detailing. The Parisienne truly stands out as one of the most refined vehicles of its era. What an incredibly rich and detailed interior this car has, truly a treat to look at. Now, let's move on to the most exciting part, what's under the hood. Powering this Pontiac is Chevrolet's 348 cubic inch V8 engine. Introduced for the 1958 model year, the 348 marked the debut of Chevy's new big block V8 family and engine line that would later evolve into the legendary 409. In 1958, this 348 was the largest engine you could order in a Pontiac Parisienne or in a US market Chevrolet. The Canadian Pontiac lineup started with the 261 cubic inch inline 6 as standard equipment. Above that, buyers could opt for the 283 V8, available with either a 2-barrel or 4-barrel carburetor. At the top sat this 348 V8, offered in versions with a single 4-barrel carb or a setup using 3 2-barrel carburetors. The example here features the single 4-barrel configuration, rated at 250 horsepower. The 348 had a few distinctive engineering features, including those scalloped valve covers, a design quirk that came from the engine's unique offset valve arrangement. The valves were staggered vertically to reduce the overall height of the block, giving engineers more flexibility to fit the engine into different vehicles. That's why it has that unusual, instantly recognizable appearance. This engine was a rare option for Canadian Pontiacs, though, largely because fuel prices were higher in Canada even back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Most Canadian buyers preferred smaller, more economical power plants, which is why the 6-cylinder was standard equipment, a setup not typically offered in US Pontiacs. As a result, finding one of these big-engine Canadian models today is quite uncommon. For instance, my own 1970 Impala was factory-equipped with the 454 big block, and from what I've read, only about 40 examples were sold new in Canada with that engine, making it exceptionally rare. So, after going through this beautiful 1958 Pontiac Parisienne and its fascinating history, what are your thoughts on these Canadian Pontiacs from the 1950s? How do you feel about this particular one with the 348 V8 or even the green 6-cylinder version we looked at earlier? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thanks for watching.